was a brand new model called the Boeing 737 MAX 8.
They didn't understand the danger that they were walking into.
Pull up. Pull up.
The plane had flown into the sea, at full speed.
The passengers would, of course, been hysterical. Computers, laptops, phones would have been flying around.
You can tell how violent that impact was.
People shouldn't innocently buy an airplane ticket and then be in a flying coffin.
Boeing had installed a flight control system on the 737 MAX that had the power to take control of the plane from the pilots without them even knowing about it.
They're turning the pages to find out what the hell it is.
Was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Will passengers be willing to fly again on its troubled MAX plane?
346 people died. Can you answer a few questions here about that?
On a sunny March morning in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, a truly remarkable group of passengers converged on Bola International Airport. 149 passengers from 35 different countries around the world got ready to board Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, heading off to Nairobi.
It was seemingly just packed with people who are on goodwill missions of various kinds. There was a big environmental conference happening in Nairobi, a UN environmental conference.
Amongst the 149 passengers were also 9 Ethiopians, and one of them was Tamru Mulu, who is a child protection advocate.
He was a kind of person who's really passionate about life, especially children who are suffering from conflict, drought.
Also on that Ethiopian Airlines flight were 8 Americans, including 24-year-old Samia Stumo, who was raised on a Massachusetts farm by a family with a very strong tradition of activism. Samia had just started work for ThinkWell, which is a global healthcare organization.
This was her first assignment. She was going to East Africa. She, at 24, had impressed them that they sent her instead of someone, a dozen years her senior.
But not everyone on that flight was on a goodwill mission. There were also 2 brothers from California, Melvin and Bennett Riffle, on one last adventure together because Melvin was about to become a new father.
Tell me how big this was for these 2 brothers to do this together. That was pretty remarkable.
I thought so. I mean,
No, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's rare that 2 brothers their age would stay close enough to want to travel with each other like that.
Also on Ethiopian Air 302 that morning, a young Russian couple on vacation, Alexander Polyakov and his wife, Ekaterina.
Они очень любили путешествовать. У них мечта была сразу, но они перво-наперво, как они хотели именно поехать в этот национальный парк в Кению, чтобы увидеть крупных кошек.
And as they got ready to board, Ekaterina posted this cell phone video on Instagram of their plane outside that was waiting for them.
And, in general, very few people think much about the model of the plane that they're on. It's something that most people really don't think twice about.
In fact, it was a brand new model welcomed into the Ethiopian Airlines fleet with a lot of ceremony just months earlier, called the Boeing 737 MAX 8.
We are welcoming the state-of-the-art modern airplane, the 737 MAX 8.
It was a groundbreaking move for Ethiopian Airlines to acquire this aircraft. fact that it was new, the fact that it uses the latest technology.
Boeing had had a track record of success, and all expectations at the time were that the MAX would just be, the next big thing for the company.
But it turns out this brand new plane had a secret, unknown even to the pilots. And when it was revealed, it would not just impact Boeing in shocking and unforeseen ways, but the entire air traveling community worldwide.
Boeing is an iconic American company. They're known as the king of the sky. This is a company that's at the heart of American engineering and American manufacturing.
For Captain Sully, celebrated for successfully landing his crippled plane on New York's Hudson River, Boeing has long been the gold standard for passenger aircraft.
Boeing had a century-long history of engineering excellence, an effective culture, good leadership.
There's a saying, and it stands today: if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. It's affirmation that Boeing has had our back for decades.
This is the 707, Boeing's prototype jet airliner, capable of speeds and altitudes which will revolutionize commercial air travel.
The 707 launches in 1958, and right off the bat, it is a huge success for Boeing. And it just so happens to be the same year that Frank Sinatra releases Come Fly With Me.
Come fly with me.
It speaks to generations of people for whom getting on an airplane was something very special. And it was exotic, and it was desirable, and it was glamorous.
Air travel became sort of the vogue.
People would dress up to travel. Meals and flights were not a joke, something that people might look forward to.
The 1960s were an extraordinary period for the company because of the 7 series of planes.
707 was the first successful jet. After that, Boeing just started building more and more, and the 727 came, the 737 came.
And then they would do the 747. The so-called Queen of the Skies, the first jumbo jet. Boeing, from that point forward, was the premier maker of passenger aircraft.
By the 1980s, Boeing is unmatched in terms of its power, its reach, and those 700s planes are it.
The company was so important to our country's economy, in part because it was the largest exporter in the world.
I mean, they manufacture Air Force One. I don't think you can get kind of any bigger than that.
But by the 1990s, Boeing started to face truly stiff competition from this European consortium called Airbus. But up until that point, Boeing hadn't really taken them all that seriously. But suddenly, they're up and coming.
They've really accelerated to become the only other, at this point, major global competitor to Boeing for commercial aircraft.
In late 2010, Airbus comes out with this new model that really shakes up the industry and puts serious pressure on Boeing to innovate.
The A320neo, a single-aisle aircraft that had new, more fuel-efficient engines that could fly farther and for cheaper.
People want to fly direct, and to do that, you need smaller, more efficient planes.
Boeing was focused on the wide-body world. Airbus beat them to the chase.
The A320neo. Damned if they didn't wind up becoming their fastest-selling airliner. And then Boeing's like, well, wait, what are we going to do?
Boeing comes up with what they think is this really smart plan. Instead of developing an entirely new plane to catch up with Airbus, they decide to take a shortcut and revamp a model that's already on the market, saving them a lot of extra time and money.
That's when they said, okay, we can take another look at the next iteration of 737.
There were new engines, larger, more fuel-efficient engines being added to this aircraft.
Boeing calls this new model the 737 MAX, and they promise they're going to fly more people, it'll cost less money, use less fuel, and cost a lot less to operate.
United Airlines says it has cut a new deal with Boeing to build 150 737s for its fleet over the next 10 years, giving the aircraft manufacturer a leg up against its main competitor, Airbus.
The Boeing 737 MAX was the fastest-selling airliner in Boeing history. Another ball out of the park for Boeing commercial aircraft.
You've got United and American and Southwest all lining up to buy it, along with 70 other buyers around the world.
One of the big customers early on was a young budget carrier in Indonesia called Lion Air. It was a huge deal.
Tonight's Money Matters, Boeing has finalized its biggest sale ever, a $22 billion order from Lion Air of Indonesia.
The 737 MAX 8 had been flying for 17 months without any incident, but then in October of 2018, suddenly, out of the blue, an alarming problem developed with one of Lion Air's brand new MAX planes.
They don't realize that there's something in it that could potentially be hazardous and something that pilots and co-pilots are not familiar with.
All of us are screaming like we are in a roller coaster. To be honest, I think this is my last flight and this is my last day.
Jakarta is the capital, the largest city in Indonesia, and it's a bustling metropolitan with around 10 million residents. The aviation industry was booming, especially with the increase of the middle class in Indonesia.
One of the airlines that benefited from that boom in air travel is Lion Air, an aggressive, rapidly growing budget Indonesian air carrier. In 2011, Lion Air made a huge splash buying more than 200 of Boeing's 737 MAX 8 planes.
Even the signing was overseen by then U.S. President Barack Obama.
So I want to congratulate Lion Air for their incredible success.
One of the Lion Air pilots chosen to fly the new 737 MAX was 31-year-old Bhavya Saneja. He's an Indian national whose dreams of being a pilot started when he was just a child.
So can you tell me about your son?
Yes, Bob, my son was a gifted child, a blessed child. I was into aviation, and for an aviator, when the child is flying and he becomes a commander, it is a big thing, you know, it is the sort of pinnacle of your dreams.
Even though her son had over 6,000 hours of flight experience, Sangeeta says she was really concerned after learning that he wouldn't be going through pilot simulator training for the MAX.
I said, you haven't had a simulator training, how can you go for MAX? And it is a more powerful engine. So without a simulator, how will you manage?
One of the core selling points for Boeing of the 737 MAX was you don't need pilot training in the simulator.
They were selling this to airlines as essentially just another 737 that the airline pilots could fly without learning all that much new.
It's a huge deal to not have to have simulator training for pilots for any airline. It costs money and time. It takes the pilot off of the line and flying passengers around.
Lion Air had asked Boeing about simulator training for their pilots, and Boeing dissuaded them from this.
Now, according to internal Boeing documents, one of their employees ridiculed the request in a message to a colleague saying, now, Lion Air might need a sim to fly the MAX, and maybe because of their own stupidity, I'm scrambling, trying to figure out how to unscrew this now. Idiots.
Well, they were mocking them because if Lion Air required simulator training, then other airlines would say, well, wait a minute. If they're requiring it, maybe we need it. Then the whole house of cards would start to fall apart.
He said, Mom, I've been given ground training. They have given me a training on iPad. I said, what, an iPad?
So he would sit down with an iPad course, and I think there were 3 or 4 parts, and it went through a robotic voice describing what the MAX is about.
The 737 MAX has a 69-inch fan.
Did you see anything in it that looks, wow, that's substantial, we should probably do more training?
It seemed to be enough.
He trusted Boeing blindly, and that trust, you know, gave him immense confidence. He was empowered.
In October of 2018, Lion Air had a handful of the new 737 MAXs in its fleet, and one of the aircraft was going to be departing from Bali with the crew and passengers.
Me and my colleague in office, we went to Bali about October 2018. Bali is amazing for holiday, especially in Asia.
Lion Air flight JT043 was scheduled to take off from Bali to Jakarta.
The flight was quite full of passengers, and most of them are local or domestic tourists like me. It's around 7 or 10 minutes after the takeoff, the flight suddenly feels like a fall down.
It was a dive, a steep drop, 200 feet, and it wasn't something that was just caused by turbulence.
All of us are screaming like we are in a roller coaster.
How many times did it go up and down?
Up and down 4 times.
4 times?
Yes, the flight attendant who was sitting in the back, they could feel it up and down in extreme way.
When an aircraft is pitching aggressively downward like this aircraft was, and it may feel as if your stomach is coming up into your throat, basically, but then comes the positive G's. It'll squash you down into your seat.
To be honest, I think it's almost like this is my last flight and this is my last day.
It just so happened there was a third pilot traveling on the plane, and he steps in and helps them get control of the situation.
Until it's landed to the airport, I can hear everyone like say, so relief. Some of the passengers are Muslim. I can hear that say, Alhamdulillah, thanks God. I cannot say it in a word. It's really relief. Yeah, I still feel a little bit shaky until now about that.
The pilots were able to control it. They knew they had a problem, but they didn't understand exactly what the nature of the problem was.
After the flight successfully landed in Jakarta, the pilots logged that they had had some issues, but they left a lot of gaps in understanding what had happened on that flight.
That left the next crew in the dark about potential problems with the aircraft.
The very next day, Captain Sunasia is assigned to an early morning flight out of Jakarta on that same 737 MAX, but he was given an incomplete report about what happened to that plane the previous night.
These are 2 different flights, but the same exact plane. So it's something that spells disaster.
On the early morning of October 29, 2018, at the airport in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, Lion Air Flight 610 was getting ready to take off. Its destination was the city of Pangkal Pinang, which is located on the Indonesian island of Bangka.
There was 189 people on board, 181 passengers, 2 pilots, and 6 crew members.
One of the passengers was Miss Fiona Ayuzan. She was a businesswoman, 29 years old. She was flying back to Bangka for work.
Bawain kopi ya Pak, gitu. Karena saya suka kopi Bangka.
Pas pulang ke rumah, Mama bilang sekolah yang benar, terus dikasih uang jajan. Terus kalau besok paginya udah nggak ngeliat, soalnya udah berangkat duluan mamanya.
There was also another passenger by the name of Fendi Cristanto. He was flying to Bangka on a business trip and also on a personal trip. His father just passed away.
Karena dia mau mengikuti sembayang bersama dengan keluarganya untuk sembayang orang tuanya. Pulang mau ngikutin sembayang yang ke-21 hari.
One of the passengers shot some video as they were boarding the flight, No one on board, including the pilots, had any idea that this very same plane suffered a near catastrophe in the air just the previous day. And on that video, you can see the brand new 737 MAX out the window.
Lion Air Flight 610 on that same 737 MAX is taking off from Jakarta. Very shortly after the flight takes off, the pilots are struggling with the plane.
The stick shaker pops off. It is loud and it is rattling in the captain's hands. There are a cacophony, a tidal wave of other distracting alerts. Airspeed disagree, altitude disagreed.
Pull up, pull up. Just 10 minutes later, around 6:30 in the morning, a tugboat captain was out on the Java Sea, just east of Jakarta.
Saya merasakan ada sesuatu benda yang jatuh. Nah, di situ dalam hitungan detik terdengar dentuman cukup keras.
Apa itu?
Jadi saya menghubungi Jakarta Radio.
Iya, di siapa?
Itu telah terjadi pesawat jatuh.
The crash site, it is about 25 miles from Jakarta seaport. On my way to the crash sites, really, I pray to God. I had great expectation that everybody still alive. Arriving on scene, when I saw the debris, the small pieces of fuselage, I lost my hope.
Kalau di dalam, kebanyakan itu hampir sama dengan yang ada di permukaan, karena yang ada di dasar laut, di kedalaman itu adalah potongan-potongan tubuh ataupun bagian-bagian pesawat, entah itu serpihan, kursi.
Presiden Direktur Lion Air Edward.
When news of the crash broke, I immediately flew in from Beijing, where I was based at the time. So the sun has just gone down, and you can see all the police officers along this dock. After arriving in Jakarta, our team headed out straight to the docks where the wreckage from the plane was being brought in. Whether it crashed or what happened, we still don't even know. But these crews have been pulling up and carrying out debris piece by piece. By the next day, the family members of the passengers were gathering and anxiously really waiting for word on whether their loved ones had survived the crash. Among the family members that I got the chance to talk to was the wife of that passenger who took that video of himself boarding onto the Lion airplane just minutes before it crashed. Your husband actually was taking video of the others getting on the plane when he got on?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you show that to us? Well, these are a lot of the other passengers that were on the plane?
Yeah.
Is there still some hope that there are survivors?
Yeah, we do believe that God still control, and we still have some hope that they can find him alive.
It was clear pretty quickly that the plane had flown into the sea, at full speed, and came apart with such force that there was no way anyone could have survived.
Berdoa buat cepet ketemu gitu. Berdoa biar tetap selamat, tapi nggak selamat gitu.
Karena benar-benar saya merasa kehilangan.
Hubungan antara Fiona dengan ibunya ini sangat dekat. Nah, begitu mendengar kecelakaan itu benar-benar down sekali. Benar-benar shock, down. Jadi satu hari setelah pesawat jatuh, mendengar kabar ibu yang meninggal.
Fendi left behind a wife and 4 children, the youngest who was 5 years old.
Jujur ya Bu, suami saya itu kalau naik pesawat itu memang sangat khawatir. Dia itu paling takut kalau naik, dengan rasa ketakutan yang dia alami gitu loh.
At the time, very little was understood about what might have happened. Brand new plane, nice enough day, nothing in particular that would point to an immediate cause of this accident.
This is a fairly new plane. The 737 MAX, it had only 800 flight hours.
But it turns out there was a hidden danger on that plane. A flight control system that Boeing did not even tell the pilots about.
There was nothing in the manuals that alerted the pilots to the existence of this new system that was placed on the MAX.
Pull up.
It has one mission, and that's to drive the nose down.
Terrain.
And it will not stop.
Pull up.
Was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Pull up.
Devastating plane crash in Indonesia.
Lion Air jet with 189 people on board fell into the sea minutes after takeoff, leaving no survivors.
So far, 24 body bags have been delivered. The jet was a new Boeing 737.
I gotta say, my first thoughts were, boy, it's a brand new airplane. It must have been bad maintenance, or it must have been pilot error.
A lot of Indonesians initially just saw that this was Lion Air's fault.
ABC's David Curley has the story. Good morning, David.
George, the real thing that we need to find are those two black boxes, which will yield a lot of answers to all these questions.
The National Transport Safety Committee found the flight data recorder on the 1st of November. It was just only 3 days after the crash.
As they look at the contents of the flight data recorder, it becomes clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The pilots are struggling with the plane, almost in a tug of war.
When we found the black box, we found that the aircraft was pitching up and then down, down and up and down and up. It's up and down for about 24 times.
Had you ever seen anything quite like this?
I never knew any case of the aircraft can fly up and down like this. I knew that the pilot was fighting with the aircraft.
It would have been a terrifying roller coaster ride. During that time period, the passengers would have, of course, been hysterical. Things would have been flying in the cabin. Computers, laptops, phones would have been flying around. People would have been screaming.
It was a clear weather, so they could see the sea. And I think it will be very scary for everyone in the cabin to see outside, to feel the speed.
Sepuluh menit atau berapa itu? Rasa ketakutannya sangat amat.
Saya yakin saat itu dia sangat takut sekali, Bu, dengan pesawat yang goyang seperti itu. Saya bisa ngerasain juga.
When the cockpit recorder was eventually recovered, it was revealed that pilots were rifling through the pilot manual, trying to apparently figure out what to do.
They're turning the pages to find out what the hell it is, why the aircraft is going down.
They start shouting about which procedure should do. They knew that they were having serious problems and they just screaming the name of God.
That point of time, that only pain he must have felt was the sense of failure, that he's not able to save others, except that he was a brave child, you know.
We surprised. It's very strange that the aircraft doing that way. Then we asked Boeing what kind of system that may create this way.
What Boeing revealed to investigators came as a complete surprise. It turns out that Boeing had installed a flight control system on the 737 MAX that had the power to take control of the plane from the pilots without them even knowing about it. The program was called MCAS.
MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, and that this system, under certain circumstances, can trigger in such a way that it will cause the airplane to nose down.
Why did Boeing put this MCAS system? What was it for? It's a mystery not only for us, but also for the pilot and co-pilot on board the plane.
So the reason they put MCAS on the airplane was because they put these brand new huge engines on an old airframe.
In order to have sufficient ground clearance, they moved the engine further up above the leading edge of the wing and further forward, and that changed the way the airplane flew.
And this effect of the engines came in and the airplane starts to want to pitch up all by itself. The idea was to provide something that would offset that pitching moment or causing the nose to come up.
When the plane computers think the plane is in danger of a stall, so in very basic terms, MCAS pushes the plane's nose down by automatically triggering the rear horizontal stabilizer.
So the MCAS is there to correct what MCAS thinks is wrong.
Right.
The pilots have no idea why this plane is going down against their will,
Yes.
so they tried to fight it back.
Yes. One of the most fundamental muscle memory things about knows how to do. If the nose goes down too far, you pull it back and you trim. And this battle goes back and forth a couple of dozen times.
So it was MCAS, it was the computer against the pilot.
Yes, and the way MCAS was designed, it was given the control authority to do it as many times as necessary. In other words, it was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Boeing's revelations about the MCAS system and what caused it to activate on the Lion Air flight in the first place would cause an uproar in the pilot community, and it would all lead to a secretly taped meeting where Boeing was recorded telling pilots that MCAS was being fixed.
Those are going to be relatively straightforward software changes that we expect to be done in a fairly short period of time. We want to make sure we're fixing the right things.
But while that was happening, the plane would continue to fly.
They were rolling the dice with the lives of the global traveling public.
Now that urgent safety warning from Boeing about their brand new 737 jets after that deadly crash in Indonesia. Now concerns about a feature that could malfunction, causing planes to abruptly dive.
A week after the Lion Air crash, Boeing issued a safety bulletin to the airlines, finally revealing the existence of a flight control system on the 737 MAX that could unexpectedly force the plane's nose down.
It's an admission by the company that there is a potential glitch in its newest aircraft.
Just a few days later, Boeing tells operators for the first time that there's a new and previously undisclosed system on the aircraft, and that is MCAS.
That was a shock. It's not in our manuals at all, except in one section, our abbreviation section. We didn't know what MCAS meant. It meant nothing to us.
But there was another critical question to be answered. What caused MCAS to force the nose of the Lion airplane down in the first place? The plane was flying normally, so why did MCAS activate?
Among a lot of surprises was that MCAS was triggered by a faulty angle of attack indicator, which is a relatively innocuous piece of equipment on the side of the airplane.
The angle of attack sensor was feeding incorrect data about the angle of the plane's nose.
It was telling the plane that it was, approaching a stall situation, that its nose was pitched up.
So the plane thought that the nose was angled too high, when in fact it wasn't.
And that MCAS needed to come in and push the nose back down.
And there was a further revelation about MCAS that took investigators by complete surprise. Even though there are two angle of attack sensors on the 737 MAX, MCAS only relied on one of them.
It's a lack of redundancy that appears to my mind to be unacceptable in airplane design, because the AOA indicator is susceptible to damage. It's not a robust piece of equipment.
A single point of failure hooked to a safety critical system, you just don't do that. It's crazy.
The bottom line here is the 737 MAX is safe, and the safety is a core value for us at Boeing.
Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg went on Fox Business to reassure the public that a bulletin had been sent to all the airlines instructing pilots exactly what to do if there was another emergency situation involving the 737 MAX.
We've already issued a couple of additional bulletins that point them back to existing flight procedures to handle that kind of condition.
So Boeing is telling the pilots that one of their options is to simply turn off the power supply to the electric motor on the stabilizer. That's the, the piece that pivots up and down and controls the nose of the aircraft.
Boeing pointed out that the pilots on that previous Lion Air flight who overcame a mid-air emergency involving MCAS had followed the appropriate procedure by turning off power to the stabilizer. That was a step the pilots on the fatal flight did not take.
And that was perceived to be an indirect way of blaming the airline and blaming the pilots without also acknowledging design shortcomings of the system.
It emotionally tore me apart, as if I was blamed for him being the pilot. I was blamed for killing all the people, mothering a son who could not take care of his passengers.
Pilots were furious. Pilot unions asked Boeing, why didn't you tell us if you put something on the airplane that's going to actually interfere with my job?
Late November, about a month after the accident, 4 Boeing executives traveled to the headquarters of the Allied Pilots Association, the union that represents pilots at American Airlines.
That meeting was secretly recorded by the head of the pilots union.
Our president at the time wanted to make sure we knew exactly what was said.
We flat out deserve to know what is on our airplanes.
I don't disagree.
I don't know that understanding this system would have changed the outcome of this. We try not to overload the crews with information that's unnecessary so they actually know the information that we believe is important.
It enraged us. Boeing always gives you the information. They don't parcel it out.
We're working with the FAA right now to try to figure out what software changes we might make to eliminate the failure conditions that we experienced at Lion Air.
They said, well, we're going to correct the software, all the things that you brought up.
Those are going to be relatively straightforward software changes that we expect we can get out in a fairly short period of time. Weeks, not a year, but a couple, maybe 6 weeks-ish.
The question I have for you is, do you feel comfortable that the situation is under control today before any software fixes are implemented?
Absolutely.
They were taking a gamble with keeping that in the air. They had such a big bet on the 737 MAX. They had staked their reputation, they had staked their financial future on it.
4 months after that Lion Air crash, the 737 MAX is still flying all over the world. Meanwhile, 149 people are saying their goodbyes as they prepare to board that Ethiopian Airlines flight to Kenya. Among them, young Samia Stumo, who had just flown in from D.C. and was transiting to Nairobi for her assignment with her global health care organization.
I guess she had landed in Ethiopia, and I said, safe travels, with a bunch of exclamation points, and she said, thanks, boo.
We didn't know that there was an issue with the plane. We thought that the problem that happened in Indonesia was because of a problem with that airlines or the pilots or maintenance or something.
Because the Lion Air crash happened in the other side of the world, maybe they didn't understand the danger that they were walking into.
Samia, where are you? Where are you, Samia?
Boeing killed my daughter. We're not afraid of anybody.
The bottom line here is the 737 MAX is safe.
Pull up. We flat out deserve to know what is on our airplanes.
The nose is pointing down, and it's over.
Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashing to Earth just 6 minutes after takeoff.
There was not a plane there. There was a hole in the ground.
The pilots have no idea why this plane is going down against their will.
Pilots were furious. Why didn't you tell us if you put something on the airplane that's going to actually interfere with my job?
What really shocks me is their greed. How they have the audacity to do what they're doing.
You're not the person anymore to solve the situation.
And they really should go to jail.
And one daughter who they named Samya.
She was a force of nature. She was just, oh gosh, she was, you know, beautiful, intelligent, charismatic. She could just light up a room. But around here, you know, she raised pigs. She would sell the meat to the neighbors. If she decided you needed to buy her pork, you were going to buy her pork.
Samya very much absorbed the family ethic, that you were supposed to use your time well, you develop your skills. She became very good at her instrument, which for her was cello. Watching Samya, you got the sense of someone who had really kind of brought together all of these strains in the family, starting with Uncle Ralph in his activism, and then through her own parents.
Definitely he influenced Samya tremendously because she was out there at 9 years old campaigning for his presidential campaign. They made her cry. You know, your mother shouldn't allow you to be out here, and Ralph Nader is spoiling the election, and she understood the issues and she talked right back at them.
She of Copenhagen.
Everybody liked her, but she was very firm in her beliefs. It really kind of forced you to think about what you said, think about what you believe, and defend it.
When I met Samya, I was like really shy to like talk to people. We just would go on these fun adventures. It just helped me be more fearless.
She had this knack of making you feel as fascinating as she was.
In January 2019, Samya had landed a dream job in Washington, D.C. with a global public health organization called ThinkWell.
Just a few months into her new job at ThinkWell, Samya gets her first assignment to go overseas. They were going to send her over to East Africa in March of 2019, where she was going to help set up some new offices.
This is the kind of thing that a relatively seasoned person is usually put into, and someone like Samya, without much experience in this, we were just so blown away by her that we felt that she had the acumen to be able to figure this out.
As Samya got ready for her Africa trip, perhaps the last thing on her mind was the tragic crash in Indonesia just a few months earlier of a Boeing 737 MAX plane, killing everyone on board.
And now we're going to turn to that chilling report about the Lion Air crash. From the moment the flight took off, pilots fought a tug-of-war with an automated system that repeatedly pushed the jet's nose down.
After the crash, concerns had been raised about a new flight control system Boeing had installed on the plane called MCAS.
Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. This system, under certain circumstances, can trigger in such a way that it will cause the airplane to nose down, independent of the pilot's judgment.
It turns out there was a defective sensor on that Lion airplane that accidentally triggered MCAS to activate and caused the plane to repeatedly go into a dive before it finally crashed.
After Lion Air, there was not a lot of urgency. I think it was sort of easy to dismiss it as a one-off. I would say it pretty quickly faded from view for the majority of the traveling public.
On March 10th, 2019, Samya left D.C. for Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where she would be transferring to another plane on her way to her assignment in Kenya.
So there's 149 travelers from around the world, and they're about to get on the newest Boeing airliner, the 737 MAX. They have no idea of the danger.
On March 10th, 2019, Samya Stumo had just arrived in the Ethiopian Sababa after a long flight from Washington, D.C.
When I woke up, I just looked at the message and it said 2 more hours to Nairobi.
There were 149 passengers on that flight from 35 countries, most of them heading to Nairobi for a UN conference.
Also, at Gate 12 in Terminal 2, those 2 brothers from California, Melvin and Bennett Riffle, who were enjoying a globe-trotting jaunt together before the birth of Melvin's daughter.
When we said goodbye, he gave me a kiss and gave me a kiss on the stomach for Emma, you know, and he was all excited but nervous.
There were also this young Russian couple who posted a video on Instagram showing the 737 MAX, a brand new aircraft.
Unlike the pilots involved in that Indonesian crash, the Ethiopian Airlines pilots knew about Boeing's MCAS flight control system, and Boeing had actually sent a directive to airlines instructing pilots what to do if a plane went into a sudden dive on its own.
So Boeing is telling the pilots to turn off the power supply to the electric motor on the stabilizer. That's the, you know, the piece that pivots up and down and controls the nose of the aircraft.
It was a bright Sunday morning. The plane took off at 8:30. And 3 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft started behaving erratically.
Their instruments start to show different readings.
After 6 minutes later, the plane was spotted again about 30 miles from Addis in a small town called Bishoftu.
Tashkarakaru dubani imboba. Dubani imboba ara dufe durani mata sol qaba mata sol qaba
yeroo lafa udoo ga'uun sagalee guddaadhaa fi haara guddaatu samiitti ol ka'e.
Immediately drive to the Ethiopian Airlines compound. There were family members, people were crying and some of them holding their head, and it was so horrifying to see them.
An hour earlier or something, I talked to him and it just didn't feel right.
I don't know, I was trying to deny that it happened or it's true or somehow he has been spared.
We start in Ethiopia where around 157 people are feared dead after a plane crashed early on Sunday.
Within, I think it was 2.5 hours or 3 hours, we were on a plane headed to Addis Ababa. This dirt road takes you to the field where that crash site is. So finally, after almost 3.5 hours, that we arrive at the crash site and it's splayed out in the fields. Right next to the debris field, you have the smell of jet fuel intermingled with the smell of death. And you can see those workers picking through everything, trying to ensure that they don't miss any key parts of the plane. The plane came down at such an enormous rate of speed, basically as fast as a cruise missile flies, that it essentially disintegrated into that hole. You can tell how violent that impact was, how shredded these metal components are. But you also have to remember that there is more difficult work here for a lot of these workers here, and that is dealing with the people who are on these planes. And everywhere you go, you see shredded bags and personal effects.
Breaking news, an Ethiopian Airlines flight has crashed.
With victims from 35 different countries on board, grief resonates all around the world, including in a small seaside town in Russia.
Ну, просто очень обидно, когда такие дети на взлете, так сказать, и на взлете своей карьеры, на взлете всего погибают.
In the Northern California town of Redding, a phone rings in the Riffle home.
And it was the embassy in Ethiopia. I said, I know why you're calling. Is it both boys? And they said it was.
It's something you can't believe when you hear it. It's just like you're in a nightmare or something, and it's just totally unbelievable.
It's one thing to lose one of your children, and you lost both.
Yeah. Lost our family, and we had to help Brittany.
I said, please don't tell me my husband's dead. And Susan said, both of them. And I just collapsed. What do I do now? I'm pregnant. What do I do? Our baby. What? What do I do now?
And word of the terrible crash also travels to a family farm nestled in the Berkshires in Massachusetts.
I turned on the BBC. It said that a plane had crashed. I remember I couldn't breathe. Then I woke up, Michael, and he told me, what are you talking about? That's impossible. That's what he told me.
My sister is not going to die in the crash. It doesn't fit into your world. And we thought, oh, well, maybe she survived. We needed to get to Ethiopia right away to help her. We had to be there. And we had to protect her.
We got in a car and we headed for JFK. Got on the flight, and along the way, along our journey, we learned that there were no survivors because we kept looking at the news.
Like Nadia and Michael, many grief-stricken families made their way to the crash site, desperate to find any trace of their loved ones.
You know, there was not a plane there. There was a hole in the ground.
Anybody able to find the body remains?
There was nothing bigger than a femur bone.
The black box data now in the hands of Ethiopian officials.
As the investigation continued in the cause of the crash, there was a question on many people's minds. Would Boeing's 737 MAX plane be implicated in a fatal tragedy again?
The Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashing to Earth just 6 minutes after takeoff in Ethiopia.
First Indonesia, now Ethiopia.
The big question here is, has the same thing happened?
The flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder were recovered the next day, and it didn't take long for investigators to conclude that there were similarities.
The faulty angle of attack sensor triggered the activation of MCAS right after takeoff, and that is almost exactly what happened on the Lion Air aircraft.
What was heard on the cockpit voice recorder, the first officer saying, pitch up, pitch up, pitch up, while the MCAS was kicking and nosediving the aircraft. It was so difficult for them to keep the aircraft under control.
Despite similarities between the two crashes, this time there was a huge difference. Not only the Ethiopian Airlines pilots knew about MCAS, they also followed Boeing's instruction on how to disable it.
The crew performed all the procedures repeatedly provided by the manufacturer, but was not able to control the aircraft.
This was actually pretty shocking because Boeing had been suggesting that overcoming an erroneous MCAS activation was pretty straightforward. If that was the case, why did this second accident happen?
To better understand why those pilots could not recover control of the plane, we asked two experienced American Airlines pilots and members of the Allied Pilots Association to take us through what might have occurred in that Ethiopian Airlines cockpit based on information from the black boxes. So in here, what will we see?
In this airplane, while it is not a MAX, the displays are very similar, but what's unique about the MAX in this case is the MCAS.
I'll be kind of simulating the MCAS with my electric trim switch to show what the MCAS would be doing.
So now we're going to take off from the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, heading to Kenya.
Yep.
Shortly after the takeoff, faulty data from the plane's angle of attack sensor triggers a myriad of false alerts in that cockpit.
Seconds after you take off.
Altitude disagree, airspeed disagree.
Grab the stick shaker is shaking continuously, very loud. This will not stop throughout the entire flight.
In the middle of all these distractions, MCAS suddenly activates.
MCAS is firing. Starts to push the nose down. I'm pulling back, and then I trim up, get a little bit of trim up on it, and the MCAS kicks in again. The MCAS is more powerful and fast than what the pilot can do, so it'll always win more.
It was at this point that the Ethiopian Airlines pilots followed Boeing's instructions and cut off electronic power to the stabilizer in the plane's tail. So you realize that MCAS is not working.
But the problem now is that the nose is so far down, they're having trouble
holding it back, yeah.
MCAS had left the plane in such a precarious position that the pilots did not have the physical strength to manually pull it out of that deep dive.
Now the stick is getting very, very heavy, so the captain says, pull with me, which is basically saying, help me. I've got a lot of weight on this, but I have no trim to do it. I go, okay, manual trim.
Okay, and I'm trying, but it's not working.
I can't hold it back.
Unable to control the plane manually, in a last-ditch effort, the Ethiopian pilots decided to turn the electronic stabilizer system back on.
The MCAS fires. And this fire goes and goes. I'm pulling back, a little bit of trip. And now the nose is pointing down and it's over. Stop the sim. They're headed toward the ground. They turn those switches back on, which is not in a checklist, but welcome to the battlefield. You're staring at the ground and you don't know what else to do.
Do you ever think about what goes through the mind and the heart of pilots when the plane is going down?
Yes, I don't like to think about that. I think that's everyone's worst nightmare.
It's hard. But they fought. They fought. They did what pilots do. The system let them down. The system let them down.
Unlike with Lion Air, the Ethiopian Air crash has sudden and swift repercussions for Boeing. Ethiopian Air immediately grounds their entire MAX fleet, and like a domino effect, countries around the world start grounding their fleets.
All of us at Boeing are deeply sorry for the loss of life in the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 and Lion Air Flight 610 accidents.
Boeing was saying that they were working on adding safeguards to MCAS to make a safe airplane even safer.
Would the accident have happened without MCAS, though? You call it a link.
It's a chain of events, right? There is no singular item. It's a chain of events.
But what you came up with in the end was flawed, was it not?
We've designed the MAX to have the flying qualities that were desired in the hands of the pilots. The MCAS system is part of that design effort.
Corporations always see profit, always see brand protection. They will not easily admit their wrongdoing, even where it is very evident. And that was the case with Boeing at that particular time.
346 people died. Can you answer a few questions here about that?
He's sorry that we lost our family members. He doesn't take any accountability for having caused their deaths.
If Boeing thought that Nadia and Michael and the other victims' families were going to just quietly go away and not try to hold the company accountable, they could not have been more wrong.
It was amazing to behold these two people from this farm in western Massachusetts coming down to take on really one of the biggest corporations in the world.
Mr. Stumo, thank you for your presence today.
Boeing killed my daughter. We're not afraid of anybody.
In the fall of 2019, Nadia went back to Ethiopia. After months of digging and searching, workers had actually been able to find some remains from the crash. And Nadia brought back those remains, and they actually included some artifacts.
We got back Samia's business journal, which talks about her plans. We got back her passport. This is a business blouse that she took with her, and it all smells of jet fuel. They fill the room with the smell. I mean, to me, it's a smell of death.
I don't want other mothers and other families to go through this. I don't want them to be trying to hear their daughter's voice and, wonder what you would say to them. So that's why it's important to work on the aviation safety. Because people shouldn't innocently buy an airplane ticket and then be in a flying coffin.
While Nadia and her husband Michael were consumed by grief, they were able to quickly turn their anguish into action against Boeing.
The family of Samia Stumo shares their pain so that others don't feel the same.
Michael and Nadia fly to Chicago and file the first lawsuit against Boeing by an American family.
I want her death not to be in vain. I don't want anybody else to die.
Nadia and Michael, along with more than 100 other families of victims around the world, alleged that Max had a defective design and that Boeing issued inadequate warnings about the plane, something that Boeing denies.
This is going to go down as one of the most callous, deliberate efforts to keep a product in the public domain for the wrong reasons.
What really shocks me is their greed. I don't know how they can still, sleep at night.
But there was a second front in Nadia and Michael's battle against Boeing. They and the other families were determined to take part in the congressional hearings into what went wrong with the 737 MAX and make sure that another crash never happened again.
We have 3 generations of farm advocacy in my family, and Nadia, of course, has, Ralph Nader and her family and that advocacy.
People should not fly this plane if it's ungrounded.
My uncle said to us practical things.
To never settle for staff, always go for the top.
Like it's cruel irony. Samia's family knew how to do it because it's a very complicated system to navigate, and it's a fight.
Nadia has really been, I think, a principal support for many of the other families out there, while Michael is pursuing the more, what's the fix and what went wrong. As we go forward, this committee will leave no stone unturned.
We kept saying you can't just have the bureaucrats and the engineers and the pilots. It's all about the families.
Today, I speak not only with my voice, but the voices of my departed family.
Paul Girogi testified.
And he had lost his entire family.
I think about the last 6 minutes a lot. My wife and my mom-in-law knew they were going to die. They had to somehow comfort the children during those final moments, knowing they were all their last. I wish I was there with them.
At the congressional hearings, there was some talk that foreign pilots failed to respond appropriately.
For me, the accident report reaffirms my belief that pilots trained in the United States would have successfully been able to handle this situation.
Chair now recognizes Captain Chelsea B. Sullenberger III.
That claim was called out after the dramatic appearance of perhaps the most famous pilot in America, Chesley Sullenberger.
I'm one of a relatively small group of people who've experienced such a crisis and lived to share what we learned about it.
Sully was the miracle on the Hudson pilot. He successfully landed his plane on New York's Hudson River after a bird strike crippled his engines. Captain Sullenberger became a national hero, immortalized by Tom Hanks in the movie Sully.
Like many pilots, I was disappointed that many were blaming
the dead crews of the accident flights. I've got to tell you from personal, first-hand experience how real and how intense the startle factor is.
I recently experienced all these warnings in a 737 MAX flight simulator during recreations of the accident flights. Even knowing what was going to happen, I could see how crews could have run out of time before they could have solved the problems.
Boeing, built into their design of MCAS sort of an assumption that pilots would be able to react to something going wrong within 4 seconds.
Well, think about that. Let's start the clock. Now, 2, 3. That's it. It's just really unlikely almost any airline crew would have acted effectively that fast. These accidents should never have happened. And I'm really distressed that they happened.
But the investigation into Boeing would go much deeper, raising questions about whether Boeing knew about problems with the MAX before they put it in the air.
The information coming out of the investigation is shocking.
And it would all lead to a face-to-face confrontation between a grieving mother from a farm and the head of one of the most powerful companies in the world.
And I want to, confront a situation, but I want to say it to you directly because I don't think you understand what we're saying.
Things that are coming out of the investigation are shocking about what Boeing knew and what it was saying internally.
House investigation concluded that the safety of the flying public was put into jeopardy by Boeing's pressure to compete with Airbus.
The committee uncovered emails and communications showing that there had been lower-level employees who raised questions several times about MCAS.
In an internal email, a Boeing engineer wrote about that problem that triggered MCAS in both plane crashes, saying, "Are we vulnerable to single sensor failures with the MCAS implementation?" This is back in 2015, asking about the vulnerability of these particular devices.
Yeah, they're setting my daughter up to die in 2019. These are questions of life and death. But that's not how they treated them in the company.
House investigators released documents they had obtained from inside Boeing showing that their own training pilots had a very dismissive attitude towards regulators and customers.
One Boeing employee who emerged as a central figure in the investigation was Chief Technical Pilot Mark Fortner, who became well known in the media after his emails became public.
Mark Fortner was the one who asked regulators whether they could remove any mention of MCAS from the flight crew operations manual. Fortner, in some of the emails and instant messages, was kind of gloating at his ability to, as he said, Jedi mind trick regulators.
In fact, it was Fortner who wrote that instant message to a colleague, mocking Lion Air for their stupidity in requesting simulator training, referring to them as idiots.
His emails were shocking, but they're just the tip of the iceberg of the failure of the safety culture at Boeing.
Some Boeing employees openly questioned the safety culture of the company during development of the 737 MAX. In one email, a worker said, "This airplane is designed by clowns, who in turn are supervised by monkeys." Another Boeing employee wrote, "Frankly, right now, all my internal warning bells are going off, and for the first time in my life, I'm sorry to say that I'm hesitant about putting my family on a Boeing airplane."
The safety culture was eviscerated under production pressure.
Meanwhile, Nadia, Michael, and the other families have another battle to fight, and that's with the Federal Aviation Administration, which certified the 737 MAX as safe and allowed it to fly even after the first crash.
One of the most explosive discoveries came from within the Federal Aviation Administration. And remember, the FAA's sole job is to ensure the safety of the traveling public.
After the Lion Air accident, the FAA had done an analysis, that indicated that if nothing was changed, that there might be, 15 accidents over the course of the next decades while the MAX was in use. And, that would make it, the deadliest commercial airliner, ever.
We stood out there in front of the FAA with our sign.
Her life was just cut short. That was caused by complicity with Boeing.
the first time, and on tonight's one-year anniversary of the first 737 MAX crash, Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg faced Congress.
For Nadia, Michael, and the other families, the person they really wanted answers from was the man in charge of Boeing.
When Dennis Muilenburg comes to Washington to testify, it's a really big moment.
I've met with the families, but they keep faces of their loved ones in people's minds. They're not going to be forgotten.
I too would like to acknowledge the families that are here with us today. And again, wanted to tell you I'm sorry. We are deeply, deeply sorry. And we'll never forget.
He was just saying words for the camera. They never tried to reach the families personally.
Who bears the principal responsibility at Boeing for the cascading events that resulted in the crash of Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302?
Mr. Chairman, my company and I are responsible. We're responsible for our airplanes. And we know there are things we need to improve. I'd grown up on a farm in Iowa. My parents taught me the value of hard work and integrity.
To do the aw shucks Iowa farm boy thing, I'm an Iowa farm boy. It doesn't cut it with me, and it was grating.
As I probably won't get to ask it another time. Well, you talked about Iowa just like one too many times, and the whole group said, go back to the farm. Go back to Iowa. Do that. You're not the person anymore to solve the situation. But I want to say it to you directly because I don't think you understand what we're saying.
I respect that. I really do. In the end, it's about safety. And
Even if you're not capable of doing that.
I respect your inputs there. I just tell you, we are very focused on safety. And you have.
I wanted to pierce through to the human being. Imagine being in our shoes.
Just a couple months after the House hearing, Muilenburg was forced out as CEO of Boeing.
But while Muilenburg may be gone, the clouds of suspicion over Boeing remain.
And the Justice Department is investigating, and hopefully some people are going to go to jail.
But after losing billions because of the MAX scandal, Boeing's commercial future may hinge on one question: will passengers be willing to fly again on its troubled MAX?
The Justice Department has launched a criminal investigation into the plane's development.
The government opened a criminal probe. The investigation is focused on whether Boeing withheld information from regulators.
The Justice Department would not talk to us about the criminal investigation, but sources have told 2020 that at this point, agents are looking hard at one former Boeing employee in particular.
Prosecutors at the Department of Justice were focusing on building a case involving Mark Faulkner, the former chief technical pilot for the 737 MAX.
Faulkner's attorney did not respond to our repeated requests for comment, but has stated in the past that as a pilot and Air Force vet, he would never jeopardize the safety of other pilots or their passengers.
He was part of the culture of concealment, but it certainly does not end with him. There's a lot of people much higher up in the food chain in Boeing who were involved in this.
They really should go to jail. I mean, people who are responsible for decisions which kill other human beings should be personally responsible.
But the ongoing criminal investigation is one of just many problems facing Boeing right now. Their reputation is in tatters.
At this point, Boeing is looking feverishly for any success.
Getting the MAX flying is still at the top of their list.
Boeing has made a number of changes to its MAX plane. MCAS will now rely on both sensors. It'll only activate once. Pilots will also be required to complete flight simulator training. And in a statement to 2020, Boeing said it had made a series of meaningful changes to strengthen our company's safety practices and culture.
Cleared for travel. That was the message from the Federal Aviation Administration to Boeing for its 737 MAX.
One of the longest aircraft groundings in history is over.
I am 100% comfortable with my family flying on it.
After a 20-month grounding, just last week, the FAA approved the Boeing 737 MAX to return to the skies.
And on its website, American Airlines advertises the first MAX flight from Miami to New York City on December 29th.
I do think the 737 is a safe airplane. I have no issue about that. But this MCAS thing was bad. I think that trust is going to be really hard to get back at this point.
Neither of us would ever get on the 737 MAX, and we will warn every single person we know to make sure that they don't fly on a 737 MAX.
Mr. Stumo, thank you for your presence today.
Meanwhile, this summer, Michael testified about reforming the FAA certification process, which, under federal rules, allows aircraft manufacturers to largely oversee the testing and development of planes themselves.
The FAA's core vision appears to be to reduce its direct involvement in certification.
It was like the fox guarding the chicken coop. When you have Boeing certifying Boeing, hello, what do you expect out of that?
System is not broken. However, all processes need to be improved, really each and every day.
The FAA did not respond to 2020's request for an interview to discuss the issues surrounding the 737 MAX. After the hearing, Nadia and Michael briefed victims' families from around the world on a Zoom meeting.
Thank you, really, Michael, for what you just said.
We have a role to play. You or anybody has a role to play as a victim.
She's been a great advocate for the families, her and her husband, Michael. No, I can't thank them enough.
I know the sun is in your eyes.
On the other side of the country in Redding, California, Melvin Riffle's daughter was born just 2 months after he was killed in the Ethiopian air crash. Melvin had picked out a name for his then unborn daughter, Emma.
So over here is Melvin's little hope chest.
Oh, wow.
Things that I would like Emma to remember Melvin by. This is actually his passport. This is the only thing that I got off the plane. Look, Emma, who is that? That Daddy? Yeah, it is on.
This is Samuel's room. I can't believe that this is remained untouched for more than a year. I look for Samuel all the time. I call Samuel. Sometimes I'm in the house by myself. I just shout, Samuel, Samuel, where are you? Where are you, Samuel? But Boeing took her, and I wish I could trade places with her. She deserved to live, and the world deserved to have Samuel. I know she would want her family to fight that other people not die.
Sammy just wants people that are wrong to be righted.
Something's very wrong here. I could sense by his demeanor, his voice, that this was not good. You're making your way around the property, and then finally you approach Nancy's cottage right here. What's the first thing you see? I see this door is open as it is now. No signs of a forced entry. So this is inside Nancy's cottage here. What were the first red flags that you saw as you walked in? Well, when I first walked in, right here below me was 2 large blood spots. Blood stains right here on the floor. And then over here there was a bench. And on that bench was Nancy's purse, car keys, her cell phone, her iPad. Her 2 vehicles were parked out there. There was a pillow sitting here, a beige pillow that had blood on it. And there was blood spatter on that cabinet as well as on Nancy's headboard and against the back wall. What are all these signals telling you about what happened in this cottage? I felt immediately that she was taken against her will. You thought this was a crime scene? Absolutely. right away, while investigators are on the property looking for any clues they can find. Down the road that evening, a huge discovery is made that changes the entire case's direction. We received a phone call from an officer with the California Highway Patrol who had located some bedding and clothing about 6 or 7 miles from Nancy's house on La Ponza Road. So this area here is where items were located by the California Highway Patrol. Those items consisted of bedding, a pillow, a dress, a woman's dress, a pair of shorts, and a shirt. We obviously want to find out if they were related. All of the evidence is brought back and secured in the crime lab annex. When I opened everything up, we looked at all of the evidence more thoroughly. What struck me with this bedding was that there were stains that appeared to be blood. Stains. The gingham-type print was consistent with the remaining bedding that was at L. Faro. These items were located on La Ponza along with the bedding, and this was 2 of the clothing items. My thought was that Nancy was wrapped in part of the bedding and transported, whether it be that she was deceased or whether it be that she was severely injured. We showed these items to her daughter, who confirmed, in fact, these items did come from Nancy's bedroom. Did you recognize them immediately? Yeah, it was her stuff. I think that's when I knew that something really bad had happened in it. Wasn't going to be good. That's when I knew in my heart we needed to find her, and we needed to do it now. It's Saturday evening, and police are trying desperately to figure out who would want to hurt Nancy Woodrum. Well, suddenly their potential suspect list gets really long because returning to the property from the wedding are all those guests staying at the ranch. There were approximately 20 or more guests staying in this large white house and the smaller house. These are all potential suspects in the case. Yes, it's very overwhelming. We have a missing person on this property and potentially 20 to 24. People that could be suspects but have to be injured. Now you have a suspect. Pool of 20 plus people that you've got to ask yourself, is this a thing? Where someone came into town for a wedding and became involved in a crime. I really feel like you can help us because I feel like you may have seen something. So you're searching all around the property, essentially every square inch, and then something catches your attention in the driveway. About right here I had noticed what appeared to be 2 fresh tire tracks that had pulled in and were in here. And as we're standing right below us here, I noticed what appeared to be scuffle marks, as if there was a fight between 2 people with their feet. The scene spoke very loudly to me that Nancy was assaulted inside of her bedroom and then taken somewhere against her will. I saw a pillow on the bed. To be honest, I wasn't as focused on that as much as I was kind of the rest of the room. Janine did an excellent job of getting up on top of a ladder to look down. And that's when she was able to see what looked like a handprint from up above. While I looked directly down, I really thought the pattern of it stood out as being a partial handprint. The one side that had a lot of blood most likely was against a person that was bleeding, and the other side that had just the handprint was that this could very well be the weapon that was used to suffocate or smother. So investigators swabbed this pillow right in the middle of the blood stain of the bloody hand for DNA and sent it off to a lab. I was at the property when people started coming back from the wedding. So yes, we have just this huge list of potential suspects, persons of interest, whatever you want to call them, that had ready access to Nancy. So Paradise Ranch is so remote that there just wouldn't be anybody else around to have access to Nancy, to harm her. So it's logical that you would look right at the wedding party for potential suspects to see if maybe anybody had something to do with this. You need to talk to every single one of them? Absolutely. Well, we had a search warrant for the entire property. As the wedding guests start coming and they're being told you're not allowed in. Here, some of them had children. You know, my diapers, my food, my baby's food. The scene became a little chaotic. Is it even possible for us to be able to come back later and go to sleep there? What I'm going to do right now is go find out what the answers to those questions are for you. What was the bride's reaction when you told her what was going on here? She was very emotional. She was upset. I was in complete shock and horrified and could not believe that. This was happening to Nancy, who I had just met, and she was so kind and lovely. It's extremely frustrating to us that you can see how close this house is to Nancy's residence. So you would think someone would hear a car drive up, a scream or something, but no witnesses of over 24 people heard a thing. Anything unusual happen that you guys noticed in any way with anybody? No, not anything out of the ordinary. So the bride is just sleeping on the other side of the wall from Nancy's apartment. As hard as it is to believe, Nancy's door is here. It was open and right next door, only one wall separating the two, was where the bride was, sleeping. And she said she did not hear anything. I went into the guest house, and then my girlfriends and I were doing face masks and stuff. And then we went to bed at about 11:15, did my usual thing where I pop in my earplugs and go to bed. Keep in mind that police believe that Nancy actually went missing the evening before, and then they learned that that wedding party that had been staying on the property, they were at the rehearsal dinner until late that night. We went straight to the rehearsal dinner. It was at Cass Winery, and got back from that around 10:30. I would say at midnight we all went to bed. So there was one wedding guest that we couldn't 100% account for. Him being at the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't in the wedding or anything, so I pretty much just hung out at the house. So, you were here the whole time? Yeah. He wasn't clear whether he was here, possibly alone with Nancy Woodrum, or did He, in fact, go to the event at the wedding. And so that raised some concerns. And so we had to take extra time and speak to him again the next day. We're just trying to figure out what happened. I would love to be helpful, but I don't have anything else. This is onerous at this point. All of a sudden, this guy now is not wanting to cooperate. Usually people who aren't involved bend over backwards for you. I really need your help. I don't want to impact your day. I don't want to impact your work. I prefer not to. I feel like you may have seen something. I haven't. And so that immediately was a red flag for us. And it was still confusing. We needed to clear it up as soon as possible. Now detectives decide they're going to go for round 3 with this particular guest. And this time they go right to his home. And they intend to come back with 2 things: an explanation and some DNA. We knew we had to get this interview done with or without his permission, or at least try to, and did not let him know we were coming. And we went to the front door and knocked on the door. How are you? Absolutely. There was one wedding guest whose whereabouts the night Nancy Woodrum disappeared were questionable. So we went to his residence in Northern California to try and confirm his whereabouts that night. Hey, I just got your call. Awesome. Hey, I just wanted to ask you a few more questions if you don't mind. Sure. You want to come in? Absolutely. I'm Dave. Good to meet you. I'm Clint. Nice to meet you. Have a seat. Have a seat. Absolutely. He was no longer resistive. He was very cooperative. Actually appeared to feel bad for the way he had talked. On the phone, we just had a couple more questions to clarify, and then just a picture or so. Did you go to the rehearsal and the rehearsal dinner, or did you stay? No, I went to both. Sorry, I went to the rehearsal dinner, not the rehearsal. I think there were a few pictures on my wife's phone that you can see of me at the rehearsal. Dinner. I can show you pictures from the property. His wife remembered to show us photos at the rehearsal dinner on Friday. So the confusion that he stayed back was immediately erased. It was a very frustrating time for us. All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. The wedding guest, who wasn't legally obligated to participate in the investigation, also agreed to submit a DNA sample. While all of this is happening, police are ramping up their efforts now to find Nancy. This shocking disappearance makes huge news in the Paso Robles community. Deputies are expanding their search, asking nearby residents for security. Footage. 62-year-old Nancy Woodrum has been missing since Friday afternoon. We're leveraging all of our resources to do the best we can to figure out where Nancy may have gone and what took place. This search is playing out all through these foothills and along the riverbed. There's a riverbed right behind Nancy's property line. We had search and rescue. Search all of this area out towards the riverbed, the exterior parts of Nancy's property. We also utilized helicopter to come in and search at a high level for. Signs, bodies, anything like that. We had a very good group of friends that were very close to us, and they would go on and go search, go down La Ponza, go down 58. We'd look through everything, the culverts, everything. And what was going through my mind is Nancy's a tough girl, and I know that. She's a fighter, and I'm like, she's alive. We will find her, and she's going to be okay. During the investigation, we developed another lead. So not only were the wedding guests on the property, but we learned that there was a fairly large number of other people that had access to Nancy Woodrum's property at the time she went missing. Nancy had decided to sell Paradise Ranch. It was too much work for her. She was having work done on her house to assist with the sale of the home. Why did Nancy decide to sell Paradise Ranch? She wanted to preach full-time. She really wanted to teach people about the Bible and share her hope with others. People. There were contractors, painters, plumbers, all doing repair work to finalize the sale of Nancy's residence. You needed to talk to all of them? Absolutely. Every single person that was on this property within the last couple weeks had to be located and interviewed. One of the pieces of evidence left behind was Nancy's iPad case. And all around, there were pamphlets and notes and numbers. And there was one of a painter, and the name was Carlo Fuentes, and a phone number. And so we decided that we should call Carlo Fuentes, since he was on scene, and see if he saw anything that hadn't been reported yet. Hi, I'm calling because we're investigating the disappearance of Nancy Woodrum. Do you remember when you were there on that Thursday? Do you remember if Nancy was there? Yes, she was there. He was very cooperative, very friendly with Detective Cole. Did you see Nancy having an argument or disagreement with anybody? You know, to be honest, I didn't notice anything like that. And I remember she told me, "Oh, you're a hard worker." And then she gave me a tamale. And Amanda mentioned the name of Sean Bloom, who was a general contractor who had worked on the house. And she reported that Nancy and Mr. Bloom had had some dispute over work that had been performed. And it had become quite heated and quite contentious. How would you characterize the relationship between your mother and Sean Bloom? Sean was very frustrated. He eventually got fired. He did not get payment until escrow closed for the work that he had done up to that point. Like, he wanted his money. Sean Bloom was definitely a person of interest in one of the first couple of people that we called in to be interviewed once we were done with the wedding party. Actually, I don't like working with Nancy. It's been very difficult. We had issues where Nancy was not happy with our work, fired me off the job. Okay, when was the last time you talked to Nancy? I was doing a new letter text. I have it here. All the text messages between him and Nancy made no denials about his dislike of Nancy. And what was the nature of those texts? Let's see here. So I said, if I don't get payment quickly, I'm going to begin lawsuits against you and everybody involved. We're asking everyone we talk to if you mind providing what we call a buccal swab and see if there's any DNA that might be associated. I hear what you're saying. I'm going to say, let me talk to my attorney. So we were like, all right, well, he won't give his DNA without talking to his attorney. 1, he's just being cautious, or 2, he's concerned. So which is it? Nancy grew up in San Fernando Valley. At 18 years old, she already obtained her cosmetology license and wanted to do more fashionable hairstyles. And so she commuted to Woodland Hills, where she worked in an exclusive salon. Neil Diamond's wife came in. She did Kenny Rogers. She always liked to let everybody know that by 21, she owned her own home and had up a Corvette. Then she met her husband, Robert, who was your quintessential Southern California surfer. We moved up here in 1991, and it was the 3 of us kids, my parents, and we moved from Woodland Hills to the Central Coast area. I understand that there were a number of tragedies that struck the family. So in between me and my brother, Chad, there was another baby, Christopher, Michael, and he was 10 days old when he died. He was born with a blockage in his intestines. And then your sister. She passed away shortly before her 18th birthday. Nancy's daughter, Amy, passed away from cystic fibrosis. Amy was a great person, and it really broke my parents' heart. It was sad, and I understand then you lost your father suddenly. Yep. Unexpectedly. Yep. What happened to him? He had a heart attack and collapsed as he was getting into my car. It was hard. It was very traumatic. How did Nancy cope with all of these tragedies? She had really strong faith in God and a good hope that she was going to see her loved ones again. After suffering through all these tragedies, now Nancy herself has vanished into thin air, and her loved ones are hoping against hope that somehow she'll turn up, alive and well. The family's obviously anxious. The investigators are anxious. They're trying to figure out what happened. The community's interested. Is this going to happen to somebody else? We know that a timeline is essential to a detective, and about a week into their investigation, they make a critical discovery that's going to tell them exactly the time that Nancy went missing. At midnight 17, there was a 911 call that showed up on the bill. 40 seconds, meaning it didn't go through. It gets shut off somehow, like in a split second, like very quickly. What that did was provide what appeared to be a pretty good time and date stamp on when something bad may have happened to Nancy. Approximately 12 days. Within the investigation, we got a big lead. The lab informed us that they had developed unknown male DNA on the pillow that we submitted for Nancy's bed. They submitted to the state database CODIS, but no matches were found, which meant that the person whose DNA this was had no record. To our surprise, several Days later, Sean Bloom contacted us and submitted his DNA voluntarily, which cleared him as a suspect. The DNA results also cleared that wedding guest too. Police initially found suspicious, but as they started digging deeper into the case, they found something surprising. It has investigators wondering whether this was a highly personal crime with a possible suspect much closer to home. In terms of looking at all potential suspects or persons of interest, there was information that was provided that she potentially had conflict with her son. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't talked to my mother face-to-face in probably 5 years. I think my brother had a lot of anger growing up. He did. Now I want to be part of the religion that we were in, which was his decision, but he was angry about it. She tends to correct our teachings about God and everything, and that's when I kind of just squashed the relationship. How bitter or challenging did the relationship become between Chad and your mother, Nancy? At the point of her disappearance, it was not good. They hadn't spoken in quite a while, and my mom was not allowed to see his kids. But Nancy and Chad were texting each other the night before, right before she disappeared. Yeah. She was reaching out to my brother, trying to just get on common ground maybe with him that way. He was the last text to her that she had on her phone. He said he doesn't trust cops and that he's not coming to the station. We were welcome to come to his house and interview him. So we did, and he refused to give his DNA. He was adamant about it. How can I mention the DNA samples? It would just solely be specifically for this investigation. I've heard of cases of misappropriated samples, and it can ruin people's lives. Unless it's mandatory, I strongly stand by my decision. So we surveilled him. We watched him drink 5 or 6 beers. He put the empties in the cab of his truck, and then he drove home. Chad was stopped and arrested for driving with an open container. While the charge was dropped, those beer bottles were sent to the lab for DNA testing. Chad ultimately was cleared by DNA. The case kind of did stall because you got a lot of people we've looked into up to this point, and we're not getting a lot of traction. Was there a point when you felt like you were desperate for news, right? We just wanted to figure out. I was more than willing to help. No one knew where. Nancy was and needed something to break. Detectives are about to throw a Hail Mary. They're going to use a relatively new crime-fighting tool, one this department has never used. If it's successful, they'll be able to find out who was in Nancy's cottage at the very moment she disappeared. I'm excited. We've got something to go on now. I always remember Nancy liking the old country music. We'd always be playing music either at Nancy's house or my family's house, and it was a big part of our lives. Every summer they would set up a concert series, and Nancy volunteered her property for this. It just was a music party, and everyone would dance, and she loved that. This was one of her favorite songs that she liked when I sang, and It's called Syrup and Honey by Duffy. Don't you be wasting all your money on syrup and honey. It'd be good. We just kind of came to the conclusion that we might never know what happened to her. It was really tough, and it was tough for me, but her daughter and child, and her grandkids like that, it was hard. We were definitely very frustrated. The public was unhappy. They felt like we weren't doing anything. They felt like we weren't working the case. We were working on it every single day. The case kind of did stall because it came to the point where we sort of ran out of investigative leads. Other avenues had to be explored, and one of the detectives had recently heard about this novel type of evidence called geofencing. So you hit a wall in the investigation. You decide you're going to try something new called geofencing, and this is something that really hasn't been done in California before. At that time, yes, we were one of the first agencies in the state of California that did this. What is called a Google geofence. You could put a fence, a virtual fence, around an area, a house, a property, and Google will track which Google accounts, emails, or cell phones come within that fence in a given period of time. These are actually GPS coordinates that you send to Google. Yes, you're essentially able to isolate not necessarily who's on the property, but what devices may be on the property, and that's giving you an avenue to now investigate. It doesn't matter what kind of phone you have, iPhone, Android, Google is tracking you. That is correct. As long as location services are on your cellular device. Google is tracking that phone and you in order to obtain Google geofence information. Search warrants needed to be written and served upon Google for a very specific time period. Now remember, because of that interrupted 911 call at 12:17 a.m., well, that gives detectives a timeline to work with as to when she went missing. Then Google sends the results. And what do you see? What you're seeing here is what we got back. So this is your first fence? Some people feel that there are privacy concerns. Paradise Ranch is in a rural area. There are not going to be a lot of unknown people who are going to be located in this geofence. So little by little, we're zooming in here. These are the phones associated with the wedding guests. That is correct. The larger circle here within this circle is all wedding guests. And it looks like there's 4. Yeah, 20 plus wedding guests. Correct. The reason their phones aren't showing is their phones are probably kind of in silent mode sleeping. No apps are being used, so that's why you only see 4. And just to be clear, this number, this is not a phone number. Correct? Correct. Google assigns each cell phone its own device number. The device number is right here, and that is specific to whoever owns that phone. It's like a fingerprint. By now, all the wedding guests have been cleared, so those numbers are not really the major focus of detectives. What is the major focus is what they see. When they examine Nancy's cottage, as we get here, that is actually Nancy's studio, and we see a cell phone, what we call pinging, basically right in the wall of Nancy's studio. It pings here at 1:33 in the morning and at 0.1. 52 hours. And that's the time when you believe Nancy disappeared. That is 100% when we believe Nancy disappeared. I can tell you from my perspective, I'm excited. We've got something. So I'm going to go on now. Could have been Nancy's phone. We don't know, but what we do know is it's at strange odd hours, and it's inside her studio. So this is a potentially huge moment in the investigation. Either that phone belongs to Nancy, and it's another dead end, or it belongs to someone else. You get a name, and that person becomes your most likely killer. 100%. Either that device leads us to a suspect, or we are back to absolutely nothing. Square one. Yes. For months, it's been a daunting mystery. Who could have taken Nancy Woodrum from her beautiful Paso Robles property in California and in the middle of a wedding where more than 20 guests were staying? But thanks to geofencing, this cell phone tracking technology, investigators finally have their first big clue. So this is a key moment in the investigation. You have this huge piece of evidence, a cell phone inside Nancy's cottage. We have to figure out who it belongs to. What's next? We have to write another set of warrant for the subscriber information. So it starts the ball rolling, but there's still a fair amount of wait and wait for the data. Sometimes it could take a few weeks. It's in November. I'm in the courthouse and my phone rings. It's my partner, and they said, "You're not going to believe this. We got a name of who owned that device, and it is Carlo Fuentes. A name you recognize. The painter. Yes. Carlo Fuentes was painting at Nancy's residence numerous times prior to her going missing. Wait a minute. The painter? Well, this is a shock to investigators because remember, they had already interviewed Carlo Fuentes, florist, earlier. This guy was cooperative and mild-mannered, and there was no reason to suspect him then, but now there's a reason. We know it's his phone. We know he's there. We know he had that opportunity because he's familiar with the property. He was familiar with Nancy's habits. All those things added up. There's not a reasonable explanation why anybody would be out doing painting at that time of night. It's looking like he's at least somebody that needs to be talked to again. So once we get Carlo identified, we need to know as much as we can about him. What did you find? We spoke to people that he painted for and friends. Seemed like just a normal guy who had come here from Mexico. He was one of those guys that you'd want on your team. Worked on and off for me for 20 years. He just had a good way of communicating, which is, kind of rare in the trades. Seemed very neat. Tidy painter and professional. He was great with clients, very polite and courteous. Just loved being a dad. He was, loved his daughter, like just raved about his daughter. He was a father, a husband, and by all accounts was someone who was just leading a normal life. The geofence hit was not enough to arrest him at the time, in large part because it's simply a phone. It doesn't prove that Carlo Fuentes Flores was in possession of his phone at that time. The phone could have been in the possession of somebody else. You looked into his criminal record. Anything there? There was absolutely nothing in his criminal record, either in Mexico or the United States. We found no indication that he had a criminal history anywhere. It was really kind of a surprise that way. He wasn't in a romantic relationship with her. There was not a dispute over funds. There was simply no connection or explanation for why this normal person would try to hurt Nancy. Now, this is quite baffling to detectives because their initial findings just don't fit the pattern of a suspect in a brutal crime. It isn't adding up why. Carlo's phone was at Nancy's cottage. That is, until they do a deep dive into his Google search history and find something surprising. You found something unexpected? Yes. He was doing Google searches for cougar in sexy lingerie videos. That's odd. That is odd, yes. As you can see, cougar lingerie porn videos, sexy cougars. This has a theme to it that is tied to our case. Nancy Woodrum was older than Carlo Fuentes by about 15 to 20 years, and this is cougar porn. He clearly has a thing for older women. Based on his Google search history, absolutely. As we went further into his Google search history, we found where he was searching for escorts in different cities that he was in. And did he connect with any of these women? We believe he did, based on some things we found on his cell phone. We found numerous videos of him having sex, videos that he shot himself with various women. Yes, I would say there was at least 10 to 15 videos. So this father, this husband, had secrets, a lot of deep secrets that most people don't have. There was the daytime, very nice, courteous painter, excellent painter, great at his job. And then there was the night, kind of weird fetish, drinking too much. Fuentes Flores. I noticed after a period of time that he was drinking more and kind of like hooking up with different women. There was times where he asked actually to borrow money from me to go to Vegas. And girls of the night kind of thing. He had told me about a call girl he had picked up in Las Vegas. And then there was an older gal that he was seeing. So I just told him, hey man, you're going to mess it up. You've got a wife, you got a daughter. And so I tried to warn him, multiple times. We needed more evidence to make this an airtight case. So we wanted to get Carlo's DNA without letting him know that we were onto him. The detectives began surveillance on Carlo Fuentes Flores shortly thereafter in order to get him. actual DNA sample from him. We used our special operations unit because what they do all day long is surveillance of people and drug dealers and gang members. Well, we know Carlo is not a drug dealer and not a gang member, but he's now on those officers' sites. He has no clue what's going to happen to him next. So now investigators have that geofencing evidence showing Carlo Fuentes Flores' phone at the crime scene. And they've also got his search history of porn and escorts. But they're after more conclusive proof that he did something to Nancy Woodrum. A DNA match to that bloody pillow. So we followed him, and he went to a local restaurant, had lunch with his wife, and left a Coke bottle that he drank out of on the table. And when it's in a public place, then we can take it without a warrant. They retrieved this Coke bottle. They took it to the DNA lab. They had the DNA, pulled on it, and it matched the DNA that we had on the pillow. It's a match, and it's a critical moment in this investigation. Detectives are now closing in on Carlo Fuentes Flores. So once we received the confirmation that it was Carlo's DNA in the bloody handprint, we needed to talk to Carlo. We needed to hear his side of the story. Thank you for being on time. This is the room where you interrogated Carlo Fuentes. Yes, it is. This is the room. My partner, Dave, was here with me. I was off to this side. You're asking him a variety of questions. And in this clip here, you're asking about his job painting at the property. What exactly were you guys painting? Like the deck, the trim fascia boards? No. It was the deck on the big house. Yeah, on the big house. So you then start showing him pictures of the property. So that's what you consider the big main house? Yes, And that's where you did a lot of work. And the deck's back here? Yes. And you used the bathroom in there? There was a bathroom in the main house down below. And then we used a bathroom in this area right here. What were you trying to do there? What we're doing is, we're putting him on the property. We wanted to know that he knew where Nancy's studio was. They're looking for things that that person's going to tell them that is not true. And presumably, that person has no idea what we know. Did you know where Nancy stayed? To be honest, I didn't even know that she was staying in that area. He was painting for Nancy, and she was nice to him and gave him tamales, and they read scripture together. And then he doesn't know what happened with her. What have you heard about what happened to her? The only stuff I heard was from my boss, that she just disappeared, and that's it. And then we never heard anything else. So at this point in the interrogation, he's saying he doesn't know anything about what happened to Nancy. But then you start applying a little more pressure. Yes, that was a plan of ours. Please don't take this the wrong way, but are you in any way involved with Nancy? Missing? Oh, no. No. Any reason why anyone would say that? Well, because there's no reason. Yeah, there's no reason. Now, they ratchet up the pressure. They let Carlo know they have DNA evidence. And they don't buy his story. We've done a very thorough investigation. We've spent thousands of hours on this case because we waited for all of the evidence. We were able to say, no, we know you came back. We know a lot of stuff. We're giving you a chance now to change your story and be honest with us if you have something else that you'd like to tell us. At that moment, in my opinion, he knew we knew. It was no longer, what do they know? It was, oh no, they know. And you could see his body change. Oh my God, I want to be honest with you. Guys, I know that I made a mistake. I made a mistake. I could literally see my heart beating in my shirt. There's a million things going through your head, but they aren't expecting what? He says next, Fuentes Flores admits he killed Nancy, but he says it was an accident when he went to the house to retrieve some equipment. I went back and get one of the ladders I'm supposed to be getting for the next job. He said when he went and loaded the ladder up and he was backing up, he didn't know she had walked up behind him and he ran her over. So you're saying you hit her with your car, your truck? Hum. And then I took her back in the place, and that's when she collapsed. It was an accident. I hit her. I took her inside to help her. But then you start getting down a road where he probably realized he could only lie so much at that point. This was the first time in the interview when my jaw really hit the floor. How did you have sex with her? I mean, tell me how that transpired. I was drunk. Did she invite you over there, or did you just show up and... No, I just showed up there and then just to go and get the ladder. He said no, she didn't know I was coming over. And if we know it was not consensual and it was a rape and she's dead, then we have a special circumstance murder case. But what they don't know is, where is Nancy? Can we try and see if we can find where he took her? You actually bring in an iPad and you're hoping he can point out on a map where you can find Nancy? Yes. And instead, this stunning moment when he offers to take you to her body. Would you guys don't mind? I would like to take you. We would like you to do that here. All right. When Carlo Fuentes Flores told us that he would take us to Nancy Woodrum's body, we placed him in a car and he directed us due east from the Templeton substation. So the detectives went in one car and I went in a car right behind them. As we drove from Paso Robles, the journey from the police stations was about an hour. It goes from more arable land in Paso Robles to kind of more desert topography out to the Carrizo Plain, which is just on the border with Kern County. I'm thinking, wow, that's going to be a tough find. When you have something, even buried something in that area, animals dig it up. So you don't expect a lot. Carlo Fuentes' Flores' demeanor on the ride was very subdued, quiet. I know that you guys are just doing your job, and I wish that I could be forward like a long time ago, because this time it has been killing me. The longer we were driving with Carlo, the more frustrating it was becoming. We didn't feel like he was playing games with us, but this is difficult territory to remember anything. And so there was a time where we felt like maybe he wouldn't remember where he put her. How far off of the road was she? You think it might be in here? I think everyone behind us who was following us were like, okay, what's the deal? Can he find her? The anxiety is tremendous. There was something like this, and I even remember there was a car coming, and I had to bend down, and there'll be a pile of rocks around her. Can we try a different spot? Yeah, if you don't think it's this one, then right. I hadn't brought a jacket, and I remember being so cold, and I remember thinking, how is anybody going to ever find anything in that grass? I remember looking at them just walking in circles, thinking, is Nancy going to be here? He had stopped at 4 or 5 different locations. We were unable to locate the spot that Carlo said he placed Nancy. I started feeling like he may not be able to remember, and then we went to the next location, and it looked the same as the first location, which when doubt creeped into my mind again, thinking, how is anybody going to tell this location from the last location? Was this far in from the road? No, right? It was this far. So we stopped about right here, and I looked off over to my right over this way, and I saw some rocks, I don't know, 6 or 8 inches that were kind of stacked in a circle that looked completely out of place. So I turned to Carlo, who was to my left. I said, are those the rocks you're describing? He looked over and said words to the effect, oh my God, yes. He felt his knees, started crying. I saw what I believed to be a partial leg. Bone about 18 inches or so in length, and some other smaller bones. What? Looked like some vertebrae bones. I could see a human skull, which was right up into this area. About right here, just laying on the ground. Quite a few remains fairly close together, but missing a lot. And because of the animal activity in the area, her remains could be scattered for a mile, and made me feel sad for her family, and knowing that any time a loved one is missing, just the emotional trauma, but also knowing that she was left in such a remote area by herself in the middle of the night. It always has bothered me that he didn't even have the courtesy to bury her. I look back over at him and my partner over there. I was angry. This is treacherous wilderness to just leave a body out in the open. Once he found Nancy's body, his demeanor changed. Can you do me a big favor? It depends on what it is, Carlos. I wish that you could talk to my little one and tell her that. And I feel so sorry about this huge mistake I made. Okay, can you please do that? Yeah, I could do that. And I think he knew he wasn't going to go home again. He was emotional. He appeared to be contrite and sad. And once we had that body, my mind immediately went towards, okay, we have to confront him again. What do we need him to say? And what charges do I need to try and prove? And then when we got back to the interview room about an hour later, then he told us what really happened. I could see a human skull. After we located Nancy Woodrum's remains, we took Carlo back to the sheriff's North Station in Templeton, where we were hoping to get a complete story about how he killed Nancy Woodrum. Investigators already know a lot about where Carlo was before Nancy was killed, and that's because of all the tracking they had been doing of his movements. This animation shows where Carlo was going throughout the day and evening. Yes, he's now traveling up to Paso Robles, and there's a church and a commercial building. Wait, Carlo goes to church on the night Nancy disappeared? Yes. Church was not in session because it's almost midnight. But yes, he pulls into the parking lot, and he stays there for 20, 30 minutes. He was sitting there in a church parking lot, chilling evidence as he's probably pondering whether he's going to go to Nancy's or not. And now he's way out here on Highway 46, headed towards Nancy's house. So, his phone is pinging along the way, and that's what's sort of drawing out this map and showing all of his movements that night. That's correct. You'll see the little dots there. He's getting closer to Nancy's residence. So, 14 minutes after midnight was the last location data that Google got. The reason that is so important at midnight 14 is a 911 call was attempted at midnight 17. When we got back to the sheriff's North Station, we went into the same interrogation room and began questioning Carlo. Again, he finally admitted what we had suspected. He came into Nancy's house around 12:15 in the morning. She saw you come in, and then he starts telling a different version about what happened. The real story? Yes. He admitted that he went there with the intention of wanting or going to have sex with her. And Carlo tells you that he believed Nancy had been flirting with him. She offered him some tamales, and he took it as flirting, which seemed very, very odd. He hit her to wake her up, which confirmed the blood spatter on the dresser and walls, and he raped her. So you intended to kill her so that you didn't get caught for the rape, right? He goes on to admit that he suffocated Nancy with a pillow. Yes, he did. After you finished having sex with her, how long did it take you to put the pillow over her face? 45 minutes. She couldn't stop her. It was so quick. He admitted to raping her, to smothering her to death. But, for some reason, he wouldn't admit that he hung up the 911 call. And you're sure that when you came in, she didn't try and dial 911 in you? Took the phone away from her? You know what? I don't remember, but I don't think she did. Yeah, I don't think she tried. Are you really sure? I mean, I was drunk, and to be honest, I don't remember. I don't remember that part. How long were you in her house for? I would say 40 minutes, yeah? And what did you do during those 40 minutes after you had sex with her? I want to put it back on the truck on the tailgate, and I just drove away. The bedding that was found on the side of La Ponza Road, Carlo confirmed with us that he had wrapped Nancy Woodrum's body up in some of that bedding. That was what blew out of his pickup as he was driving out to the Carrizo Plains. Is this the entire truth? Yes. I'm not even lying anymore. I'm just being honest with you guys. Now I have to pay the consequences. It appeared that he was sad that this had happened, and that his confession was cathartic in a way and was bringing him some degree of peace. Would you be willing to write an apology letter to Nancy's children and grandkids? And at the end of the interview, he actually wrote an apology letter to Nancy's family and an apology to his own family within that same letter. And once he wrote the apology letter, the detectives placed him under arrest. What was that like? It was a huge relief. This clip brings back a lot of memories of, at that moment, justice is going to be served for Nancy Woodrum. I can still see the emotion in your eyes. This was just a really sad case. This case was just a little more personal for me. Detective Cole presents to you a photograph and a name. Carlo Fuentes Flores. I was like, who? You're like, who? Who? Who's this? We had no idea who it was. How could it possibly be the painter, right? It kind of just opened up more questions. Like Aaron said, why? Just why? They found her body. What is going through your mind? I think there was relief. I just wanted to find her. We needed to have some closure. There's a lot of people who never get answers. And I was just thankful that we had answers. I mean, it's the worst case scenario, but knowing that we found her and she's not suffering anymore, that was a comfort. But it's still something that's really, it's a hard pill to swallow. It's one of those quiet moments where you start to cry and just, what if she just got so cheated? Finally got a chance to relax and do what she wants and retire, and then this happens to her. I just thought, how very, very unfair. Now, all that remains is a trial. Prosecutors decide not to go for the death penalty, but they're confident. They got a winning case. Now the defense has something in store, and if the judge buys it, everything could totally unravel. Hello, this is a prepaid call from Carlo, an inmate at the San Luis Obispo jail. Hello. Hello, Crystal. Carlo. Yes. I was responsible for monitoring any jail phone calls that took place involving Carlo Fuentes Flores. The ones that were of particular interest would have been the phone calls with his wife, Crystal. Did you do this, Carlo? Yes, honey, I'm so sorry. I don't know why that day, that wasn't even me. I was in like drunk. Yeah, no, Carlo, but you did like the worst thing in the whole world. I know. You did a couple of bad things mixed together, which is just crazy. Crazy. Despite the compelling evidence from the confession and Fuentes Flores police interview and admissions to his wife in recorded jail calls, he pleads not guilty. And his defense attorney has a strategy that could upend the case. The defense team presented a very spirited defense centered on a motion to suppress his. Recorded interview. Carlos spoke English with his wife. He spoke fantastic English, but he was a native Spanish speaker, and so the defense challenged that the Miranda warnings should have been given in Spanish, or he should have had an interpreter present. We wanted him to understand and make sure that he understood what he was doing. And so we had set it up. Do you understand what I'm saying? If there's at any point you don't, please ask. If you have any questions, the way I say stuff, the way I ask you stuff, please tell me. I know it's something that I do. It's probably not you, but as long as you can. Understand me. If you don't, just let me know. Ultimately, the judge denied the defense's motion to suppress and found that the detectives preserved his rights and that they properly Mirandized him and interviewed him in English. We confessed, and then we were able to find her and then thought, okay, we're done. Like this is the end. But no, now there's going to be a huge trial. So this case is set for trial in January 2022. And we show up for day one, and I see his attorney go and speak with him. As he comes back, he says, well, he wants to just plead to life without parole. He doesn't want to put his family through the publicity of a trial. Normally in a plea deal, the defendant waives his right to an appeal. But Fuentes Flores wants to preserve his right. So the judge proposes something called a slow plea. The prosecutor will still be able to present the evidence. But in the end, the judge is going to find Fuentes Flores guilty on all charges. So the judge reviewed all of the evidence I submitted, and I submitted his recorded interviews, his jail calls. I want to make sure everything was in. They're just in case. And the judge found him guilty of first-degree murder and the special circumstance that the murder was committed during a rape. The man who killed a Paso Robles woman and led investigators to her body will spend life in prison. He was found guilty of killing Woodrum during a rape and burglary, which means he isn't eligible for parole. He was given an appropriate sentence in prison. So I think in that way that justice was served. Although the family will truly never have closure as a result of what took place. What about the family? What? About what? Their family. I know. They're never going to get to see her again. This is so stupid. So stupid. So senseless. Aaron, you read the victim impact statement in court. What did you and your family want to say to Carlo? Just let him know how he changed our lives. The fact that he took her life for nothing. Just to let him know that it sickened us. And what was the point? Because now he's going to live behind bars for the rest of his life for one foolish night. People, I feel, remember Nancy as a strong woman with the biggest heart. She survived a lot of heartaches, and it made her stronger, but it made her heart beautiful. The memorial was probably the most beautiful thing. It was out at a vineyard on the way out to Nancy's property. It's a beautiful place. There was hundreds of people there, and it was just a testament to the person that she was. These photographs were all displayed at your mother's memorial, right? Yes, they really show who she was. She loved outdoors. She loved the horses she loved. Being in the barn, going camping with the grandkids. She was an amazing person. She loved God. She wanted that to be first in her life, and she wanted people to know that. And her hope that she had to see her kids again. This is the horse that my mom used to ride. Her name is Montana. She loved Montana. My daughter and I now go out on horses together. And I usually ride Montana, and my daughter rides Fire, so we've passed that down. What I once did with my mom, now I do with my daughter, and that's a good feeling. She was a huge part of our life. She was my best friend. We did everything together. Every time I ride, I think of my mom. Carrying on. That beautiful tradition, Detective Clint Cole, says he still feels a connection to Nancy's case and keeps in touch with her daughter, Amanda, reaching out to her on May 5th of every year, the anniversary of Nancy's death. We should also point out tonight, Deborah, that Carlo Fuentes Flores appealed is. Conviction. It was denied by the California Court of Appeals in July of 2023. That's our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm David Muir, and I'm Deborah Roberts. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night. From the perspective of a seasoned criminal psychology analyst and detective, novelist, delving into the intricate tapestries of human motive and the relentless pursuit of justice, we turn our attention to two cases that captivated the public imagination. These are stories not just of crime, but of calculated deception, desperate acts, and the profound impact on lives shattered and irrevocably changed. We must navigate the complex landscape of shattered lives, unraveling the threads of events that led to tragedy and the arduous journey toward truth. In the heart of Utah, a woman's grief transformed into a beacon of hope for others, only to be overshadowed by a deepening mystery. Corey Richins, author of the children's book, Are You With Me?, initially presented herself to the world as a grieving widow, finding solace in sharing her family's journey through loss. Yet, behind the veil of poignant narratives and touching tributes, a far more sinister story began to unfold, one that would challenge the very essence of her portrayed vulnerability. The narrative of Corey Richins' journey began, as many profound tragedies do, with an unexpected death. Her husband, Eric, passed away unexpectedly last year. He was only 39 years old. This sudden departure left Corey and their 3 young sons, aged 10, 9, and 6, in a state of profound shock. It is within this crucible of grief that Corey's path led her to the creation of her. Book. She described watching the struggle her children endured, seeking a means for them to cope, especially during the difficult night hours. Nights are the hardest, it seems like, for everybody, she observed, but I just wanted some story to read to my kids at night. Reading these stories, she found herself moved to tears, concluding, I was reading it, and I remember I just was in tears. And I thought, like, this is perfect for your family. It just seemed perfect. This desire to articulate the presence of the departed, even in absence, became a cornerstone of her narrative for children. Just because he's not present here with us, that doesn't mean his presence isn't here with us. And he's doing these things with us. However, the public perception of this bereaved young woman who had tragically lost her husband was soon to undergo a stark transformation. The smooth surface of her grief narrative would crack, revealing complexities that pointed towards a much darker reality. The scene that morning was one of chilling urgency. It was a little after 3 in the morning when Corey Richens made the desperate call to 911, reporting that her husband, Eric, was not breathing and felt cold to the touch. Officers were dispatched, arriving to find paramedics and firefighters already present, engaged in efforts to revive Eric. The unfolding moments captured on police body-worn cameras depicted a life-or-death struggle. Law enforcement attempted to make sense of the unfolding tragedy. Inside the bedroom, Eric Richens was visible on his back on the ground, without a pulse, not breathing. A CPR machine sounded its rhythmic, insistent cadence. In those critical initial interactions, officers sought information to understand the circumstances. When asked about the last time she saw him alert, Corey mentioned they had shared a drink at 9 o'clock, celebrating a work achievement. Hours earlier, the couple had been reveling in a significant financial success for her burgeoning real estate business. She noted that they had a cocktail before bed and mentioned her son was experiencing night terrors, which had led her to sleep with him, returning to her own bed later. When asked about the children, she explained they were asleep in their room with 2 boys. Awake nearby, their ears pressed to the door, not wanting to wake them, she pleaded, "Please don't make me come out." When questioned about her husband's health, she mentioned he sometimes took a gummy to sleep, but was unsure if he had done so that night, later confirming it was a THC gummy. She also stated he had no history of illicit drug use. Corey's mother, Lisa Darden, arrived on the scene shortly after receiving a frantic call from Corey. Rushing through the house, she found Corey in a state of absolute devastation and shock. The gravity of the situation extended to the young boys, who were confused, not crying, but aware of the heavy police. Presence. Lisa Darden recalled her son-in-law had received weekly allergy shots and wondered if it played a role in his condition. She observed that he didn't. Look at last night. He looked pale last night, and that he had mentioned his chest hurting. During the resuscitation efforts, law enforcement and medical personnel noted a surprising amount of blood. This led to an initial hypothesis of an aneurysm, a notion that seemed plausible given Eric's athletic nature. However, the circumstances surrounding his death, a healthy 39-year-old man suddenly ceasing to breathe in the middle of the night, continued to raise questions. Eric's sister, Katie, arrived in her raw, guttural anguish upon learning of her brother's death was palpable. The body camera footage captured her overwhelming pain. She, along with Corey, attempted to shield the young boys from the unfolding trauma. Eric Richens was officially declared dead at 3:58 in the morning, with notes indicating he appeared to have been deceased for some time before emergency services arrived. The stage was set for a formal investigation, including an autopsy, to unravel the mystery of this unexpected demise. The night of Eric's death, however, was also the night of a significant triumph. For Corey, they had been celebrating the potential purchase of her dream. Property, a sprawling mansion in Midway, Utah, a project envisioned to be her most ambitious real estate venture yet, valued in the millions. This acquisition represented a profound personal milestone for Corey Richards, who grew up cleaning toilets in the grand homes of Park City, dreaming of one day owning such estates herself. This moment was her validation, a testament to her aspirations to rise from humble beginnings to considerable success. Corey's own upbringing was marked by frequent moves, her parents working in construction. While not impoverished, they live a life of practical necessity. By junior high, her family settled in Heber City, Utah, where Corey cultivated strong friendships, participating in sports and social activities. She excelled. In high school, active in cheerleading and tennis, seemingly finding her place and a sense of belonging. Friends described her as a tough cookie, someone who fiercely protected those she cared about. She met Eric while working at a Home Depot in Park City. Eric, who ran a stonemasonry business, was a frequent customer. Their encounter sparked immediate chemistry, a connection noted by those around them. Eric, who was older, was a man of dynamic energy. He grew up in a ranching family in Summit County, active outdoorsman, deeply influenced by his Mormon faith. After his mission to Mexico City, he established his stonemasonry business. He was described as someone who worked hard, but he also played hard, enjoying activities like ATVs, camping, and hunting. Their relationship progressed, leading to Corey's pregnancy and a swift marriage. A pivotal moment during their wedding ceremony was the presentation of a prenup by Eric's mother, stipulating that his business belonged solely to him, and Corey would only benefit from it if he died during their marriage. Despite being pretty distraught, Corey signed it, driven by her love for Eric and her desire to marry him. This act, coupled with perceived disapproval from parts of Eric's family, marked a rough start to their union. Nevertheless, they went on to have 3 sons within 4 years, a pace Corey, a known planner, meticulously orchestrated. She was deeply devoted to her children, actively involved in every aspect of their lives, from school to sports. Eric was an equally dedicated father, coaching his son's soccer teams. Eric's business, C&E Masonry, flourished, becoming a $1 million enterprise. Their life was affluent, marked by trips and fine dining. While Corey initially stayed home with their sons, she later desired more and launched her real estate business, Richlands Realty, in 2019, focusing on flipping homes. By 2021, she was managing 15 renovation projects, generating substantial income and rapidly expanding her enterprise. On the surface, they presented an image of the all-American perfect family, complete, with a beautiful home, children, and thriving businesses. However, the foundations of this seemingly perfect life began to crack. Eric's sister, Amy, asserted that the home isn't yours, leading to intense disputes. The morning after Eric's death, amid a gathering of friends and family to celebrate Eric's life and offer condolences, a confrontation arose. While reminiscing, listening to Eric's favorite songs, and even dancing with her sons, while his sister Amy filmed, noting a light that kind of projected around them, and a feeling of solidarity, this unity proved short-lived. The following morning brought a fierce argument between Corey and Eric's sister. Amy, centered on accessing Eric's will, which was believed to be in a safe. Corey's adamant desire to retrieve it, coupled with the arrival of a locksmith, triggered a volatile exchange. Amy revealed that Eric had secretly established a trust and will, largely excluding Corey. This revelation, coupled with the discovery that the house was placed in the trust, led to a direct confrontation. "It's not your home," Amy stated. Corey countered, "It is my house. I've lived here for 10 years. The situation escalated, resulting in Amy reporting Corey punched her, leading to Corey's arrest and a subsequent plea of no contest, resulting in a guilty verdict for assault. The familial animosity was starkly evident even before Eric's funeral, with the two families maintaining separate areas, refusing to speak. The funeral itself was described as deeply uncomfortable, marked by a lavish casket and a clear division. In the weeks following Eric's death, as Corey filed a civil lawsuit disputing the trust and adjusted to life as a single mother and businesswoman, the profound impact of loss remained. She spoke about the importance of routine and the void left by her husband. Searching for resources to help her children, she lamented the lack of children's books on grief. This inspired her to write her own Are You With Me? She engaged a ghostwriter to help transform her experiences into the book, which featured a child's perspective questioning the father's presence and a deceased father's reassurance. The book was dedicated to her amazing husband and a wonderful father, accompanied by a drawing of the family. In March 2023, Corey appeared on local media to promote her book, describing it as an effort to make sense and process her family's grieving experience. Viewers expressed empathy, finding her story shocking and moving. However, a few days later, an anonymous email arrived at the station with a single, startling line in all capital letters. You know, she killed her husband. Meanwhile, authorities, continuing their investigation into Eric's death, revisited the initial observations. The EMT's comment about blood and compressions and the early aneurysm hypothesis were scrutinized. Law enforcement indicated an autopsy would be performed. The results, when they arrived, were indeed shocking. The initial autopsy report declared drug intoxication, specifically fentanyl, as the cause of death. The levels detected were described as 5 times a lethal dosage, enough to kill anyone. This finding baffled many, including Eric's family and Corey, who maintained Eric did not do drugs. The autopsy report also noted the fentanyl was not medically grade, suggesting street drugs. This discovery jump-started a criminal investigation, shifting the focus from accidental overdose to potential homicide. Police obtained a search warrant for the Richens' home, seizing electronics and searching for traces of fentanyl, but found none. During this investigation, Detective Jamie Woody engaged with Corey, who reiterated that Eric did not use drugs and expressed her shock at the findings. Corey also spoke with the chief medical examiner, inquiring about specific components noted in the toxicology report, such as acetylphenanyl, a variant of illicitly manufactured fentanyl. This confirmed the drug was from non-pharmaceutical sources. Eric's family, growing increasingly suspicious of Corey's role, came forward with concerns about the toxicology report emphasizing Eric's lack of drug use. They revealed that Eric had discovered in 2020 that Corey had taken out a substantial loan against their home, which he solely owned without his knowledge. This discovery of a significant financial deception allegedly led Eric to change his trust documents, aiming to secure his children's future. The family reported he had visited a divorce attorney. The act of deceit regarding finances and trust created a deep rift. The weight of debt pressed down on Corey. The financial strain, coupled with emotional distress from her husband's death and accusations from Eric's family, placed her under immense pressure. Running her businesses added further stress. Her significant financial burden included the Midway mansion purchased for nearly $3 million, which required millions more in renovations. She allegedly used risky hard money loans for these projects, eventually losing the mansion to foreclosure. The fallout from her financial struggles reportedly affected others. Chelsea Barney, a close friend, stated that Corey had offered to help her buy her first home, with Chelsea providing $45,000 as a down payment. However, Chelsea later discovered the deed had never been filed, leading to foreclosure and eviction, with her savings lost. Another family, Taryn and Alec Wright, alleged discovering mold and water damage in a home they purchased from Corey, leading to illness and financial ruin. More disturbing allegations surfaced concerning past incidents of Eric falling ill during a trip to Greece in 2019 while Eric was on medication for Lyme disease that prohibited alcohol consumption. He tasted alcohol in his drink and subsequently felt unwell. He confided in his sister, Katie, suggesting Corey might have tried to poison him, acclaimed Corey and her supporters denied. Then, on Valentine's Day in 2022, weeks before his death, Eric consumed a sandwich prepared by Corey. He experienced what he believed to be an allergic reaction, texting friends that he had almost lost me this time and thought she might have poisoned me. A year after Eric's death, as Corey pursued family photos, investigators were reviewing her communications. A private investigator discovered strong connection between Corey and a woman named Carmen Lauber, who worked for Corey, cleaning properties and had a history of drug-related issues. A new lead, Detective Jeff O'Driscoll, found drug paraphernalia in Carmen's trash, leading to a search of her home. They found drugs and a firearm, along with Eric's obituary taped to a mirror. This escalated Corey's status to prime suspect. Carmen Lauber, facing prosecution, testified that Corey had asked her to obtain fentanyl on 2 occasions, remarking that the first batch wasn't strong enough. Carmen identified her drug supplier as Robert Crozier. The timing of Texts between Corey and Carmen, particularly on Valentine's Day and the days leading up to Eric's death, appeared significant, with the drug link established through Carmen and the overwhelming financial motive stemming from Corey's massive debt. Police made their move. Corey Richens was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and possession of narcotics with intent to distribute. The news sent shockwaves, especially given her recent public persona as an author promoting grief coping. The defense contended it was likely an accidental overdose and that Corey was an innocent mother. The case highlighted a stark contrast: the empathetic author of a grief book versus a potential murderer. Prosecutors built their case on multiple motives. Eric's death would relieve Corey of substantial debt, estimated at over $4,500,000 owed to more than 20 lenders, and end an unhappy marriage, allowing her to get a fresh start at life. The defense argued the prosecution lacked evidence demonstrating how the drugs entered Eric's system. During a bail hearing, a forensic accountant detailed Corey's finances. Cell phone records and internet searches were presented as evidence of consciousness, of guilt. Searches included luxury prisons. Can cops uncover deleted messages? iPhone, and what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? The defense countered that these were natural reactions to serious accusations. Corey lost custody of her children shortly after her arrest. Their parental rights later terminated. While in jail, a 4-page letter was discovered in her cell. Prosecutors argued it was evidence of witness tampering, allegedly instructing her mother to relay information to her brother Ronnie about Eric obtaining drugs in Mexico. The defense claimed it was part of a fictional manuscript and attorney work product. In March 2024, charges were amended to include attempted murder for the Valentine's Day sandwich incident. The prosecution also revealed an affair between Corey and Josh Grossman, a handyman she hired. Texts between them revealed plans for a future together, including Corey stating, if he could just go away and you could just be here, life would be so perfect. Grossman testified that Corey had asked him if he had ever killed anyone. Corey's defense attorneys withdrew due to a conflict of interest. New counsel was appointed, delaying proceedings. In May 2024, Corey released an audio statement asserting her innocence, stating she acted to protect Eric and would never do that to Eric or anyone. She pleaded not guilty to remaining charges, including insurance fraud, alleging she took out a life insurance policy on Eric without his knowledge. The trial began nearly 3 years after her arrest. Prosecutors detailed the alleged motives: massive debt and an unhappy marriage, murder for money, and a Fresh start. The defense focused on the 6 hours preceding Eric's death, emphasizing the lack of evidence showing how the fentanyl entered his system. Witnesses included Eric's sister, Katie, who testified about her father's devastating call. Carmen Lauber, testifying under immunity, detailed Corey's alleged fentanyl purchases. Robert Crozier, the alleged drug seller, gave inconsistent testimony. Friends testified about Corey's alleged statements. Wishing Eric were dead. Corey's best friend, Allie Stakings, described the Valentine's Day sandwich incident as initially treated as a funny story. Josh Grossman, Corey's lover, provided emotional testimony about their affair and texts, including Corey's plea for him to hang in until Friday, the day Eric died, and her question about his experience with killing. The defense rested, without presenting witnesses, a decision that surprised many. After deliberating for just under 3 hours, the jury returned a verdict. Corey Richins was found guilty of aggravated murder and all related counts. The jury described their deliberations as constant, robust, electrifying, involving extensive discussion to resolve differing opinions. Eric's family expressed relief and gratitude for justice. The court sentenced Corey to life in prison with the possibility of parole. She also faced further charges for mortgage fraud, money laundering, forgery, and bad checks. The case underscored the profound tragedy for Eric and Corey's 3 sons, whose parental rights were terminated, leading to their adoption by Eric's sister. The memory of Eric was honored as a loving father, brother, son, and friend, remembered for his infectious laugh and deep devotion to his children. The script now transitions to a case that unfolded in the picturesque landscape of Paso Robles, California, a place renowned for its wineries and serene beauty. But beneath this idyllic facade, a dark event transpired at a secluded vacation home known as Paradise Ranch. The unsettling events began when a concerned call was made regarding Nancy Woodrum, the 62-year-old owner of the property. She was nowhere to be found. Her neighbor, responding to the call, found the door ajar and the television blaring. What followed was a discovery described as haunting and chilling, a scene that would haunt those who witnessed it. There were bloodstains on the pillow and the presence of 20 or more wedding guests. Staying at the ranch turned the serene property into a crime scene, complete with police, helicopters, and dogs. Investigators found themselves immersed in what seemed like a classic whodunit, where every guest became a potential suspect. The very air seemed thick with the chilling realization that something truly terrible had occurred. Nancy Woodrum was described as a fixture in the Paso Robles community, a woman. Known for her vibrant personality, her popular salon, the Strand, and her deep kindness. Her daughter, Amanda, spoke of their special bond and Nancy's love for life, her passion for horseback riding, and her strong Jehovah's Witness faith, which instilled in her a sense of morality and hope for a renewed earth. Nancy and her husband, Robert, had renovated the property named Paradise Ranch, fulfilling her hope of a paradise found. On Friday, May 4th, a large group of wedding guests checked into Paradise Ranch for a vineyard wedding. The bride, who found the location online, stayed in a guest house along with her bridesmaids and friends. Nancy, who lived nearby on the property, visited the guest house, offering a warm welcome her. Kindness immediately apparent to the guests. However, on Saturday, May 5th, a wave of concern swept through the community when Nancy failed to attend her Bible study, an event highly unusual for her. This prompted her neighbor to check on her, leading to the disturbing discovery of the open door and blaring television. Amanda rushed to her mother's apartment, finding everything seemingly in its place, except for Nancy herself. A stain on the carpet, missing bedding, and what appeared to be blood spatter on the walls prompted an immediate call to 911. The bride and her family, caught between wedding preparations and escalating dread, were devastated to learn of the blood and the disappearance. Their inquiries among the wedding guests yielded no sightings of Nancy. The state of panic and frantic searching that ensued was overwhelming. As investigators meticulously combed the property, an observant reserve, Detective Clinton Cole made a discovery several miles down a road on Law Ponza Road. He located bedding and clothing that appeared to be connected to Nancy's missing items, marked by what seemed to be bloodstains. The realization that these items had been transported away from Nancy's residence